Welcome to Exploring the Mystical Side of Life with your host, Michelle Aubin and Linda Lang.
Welcome to the podcast. This is Michelle Aubin, and I'm here with my co-host and friend Linda Lang. And Linda has been described as a sacred empath and emotional alchemist. She's a gifted healer, teacher, and guide who helps you step past limiting beliefs and unresolved emotions, bringing more self-awareness, more self-acceptance, and opening your mind to new possibilities. And Linda, if you could just tell us, how did you get started with this?
Oh, it's a long story, Michelle. I would go back probably to the time when I was 22 and I was diagnosed with a very aggressive and rare cancer. And I stepped away from the medical community and healed myself. And that started my journey into alternative healing. I started with herbs and supplements and cleansing the body, diet, really looking after the physical. And at that same time, right as soon as I was diagnosed, I started having like spiritual and mystical experiences and information downloads and really exploring a whole different world that wasn't part of my conscious living experience up until that time. And as I focused on my spiritual self and my physical self, probably about 2 years after the diagnosis, when I was still alive and well, because I was supposed to have died within a year, then I started to go down that path of the power of the mind and how we hold on to our stories and our pain and our emotions. And that has a physical effect on us. It has, the law of attraction, how we create from our mind. And I started to just do a lot of clearing work on the emotional and mental. And here I am today. I've done lots of studying, 30 some years of studying and practice healing myself and working with others. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's an amazing story. So you're a walking miracle, according
Yeah,
to medical thinking.
yeah, absolutely. Most doctors that hear my story either don't believe it, or some of them are starting to say, wow, they're starting to see more people that have these kind of horrific diagnoses that are actually defying the prognosis and living and healing. That was over, God, like probably 35 years ago. And, I've not had a reoccurrence. I don't follow that same kind of protocol I followed in the first 2 years. 2 years. I really was really careful the first year because I thought I was going to die. And then I was really careful the second year in case they made a mistake on the timeline, right? And then I'm like, I have to relax. I have to relax. And the one thing I would say is that, it brought me many, many gifts. And I would not want to do the experience again, and I would not want to wish it on anyone else. But I'm so grateful for it because it really opened me up and showed me my strength and my resilience, and had all these gifts, like my intuitiveness developed, and my sense as an empath. I would be able to pick up a food or a supplement and be able to gauge how my energy system reacted to know
Wow.
if it's something that brought me life or took life force energy away. And so when I actually work with people, my energy system, picks up that information from them. And I have very clear messages of good for them, not good for them, or you know what, doesn't really matter. They can do it if they want, kind of thing. It's a magical way to live in my mind, because there's so much information that's available that's not logical, that's not processed through the mind, that it's processed through energy, through physiological sensations,
Through the
and
body.
listening and listening, just listening.
Now, you just said so much in this introduction to your story, and I imagine some people hearing it might feel like this is a lot of new information, while some people might feel like familiar with this idea. So maybe we can unpack it a little, and I wonder if you could talk about that gift you describe of being in tune with the energy of something. Was that always there for you, or did that come as a result of anything you were doing?
I think that I had it on an unconscious level and didn't really realize it. Like being able to pick up, that my mother or father weren't in a great mood, so this was a good time to be quiet,
Mm-hmm.
or with teachers or whatever. It's kind of a sixth sense that you don't really think about, especially as a kid. You're not really aware of it. But how it really became conscious expression for me is that one of the things that we did when I was first diagnosed, I had this repetitive dream for the first 3 nights after I was diagnosed. And I live near a train. And so I dreamt that I would go and lay my leg on the track so the train could cut the leg off, because that was the treatment, that all they could offer me was to amputate my leg and hope that they got all the cancer. And if they didn't, I'd be dead within 5 years. And if I lived 15 years, then I would be good. But if I didn't get it amputated, I was a goner, right? So I'm here
Right.
with 2 legs today. And I had that dream. And it's funny how, I tell people about that dream and they're like, if I had that dream, I would have went for the surgery. But in my mind and my sense, the dream was saying, if I cut my leg off, it would be like I was being hit by a train. And
Mm.
so I didn't. And and then I had this knowing that I needed to go visit my brother, who had just got involved in a herbal company that he was now selling products, and he was doing something called kinesiology or muscle testing to see how the body responded. So I knew I had to go see him, which is actually pretty funny because the whole family thought my brother had gone off the deep end when they heard he was doing this. And then here I am coming at his door, knocking, saying, look, this is what's happening, and I want you to do this for me. And he wasn't able to because he couldn't detach emotionally. So he took me to the person who taught him, and I walked away with an armful of herbs. And my husband and I learned how to muscle test in that same kind of way. It was a two-person way, and I'd muscle test all my food and all the
Wow.
supplements, and I was in a fear state. I was really young. I had a baby that was probably like a year and a half and old. You lived in panic and terror every day. And I was so afraid to eat anything that in case it wasn't good for me, that I muscle tested everything. And for a while it was good. My husband was totally on board with it. But when you do this for a year, it's like, oh my God, do we have to do this again? So I just had that thought that said, I got to find a better way to do this so that, I'm not always reliant on my husband. So what happened one day was I was reaching for the herb bottle and I could feel a shift in my energy. It's like I put the request out and had enough self-awareness and presence to see or feel the difference. And it was like, oh, yes, now I had a
Yeah.
tool.
Well,
Now I had a tool.
well, what I'm hearing is that you had a tool of the muscle testing, and for people that may not have heard of that before, that's a way that you can use your body to confirm whether something is helpful or not. right? Am I correct
Yes,
in that?
yes. You could get yes or no
You can get
answers
yes or
from,
no. The using that tool was helpful, but you wanted a more simple tool, which was just sort of
more,
knowing.
yeah, independent and self-reliant, let's say that.
And so you kind of put this out like, oh, I wish there was another way, and then you were aware that you were feeling what you needed to feel to get the information,
Exactly.
which is part of kind of leading you to where you are now and the work you do with people.
It was so funny because the switch got turned on and then there was no more needing the husband. And he's like, what's going on? Right? So, I mean, it's perfect. It really is perfect. And it's a really easy way to tune in once you have that awareness of the subtle shifts in energy that happen
Yeah,
to everyone
yeah,
all the time. I liken that to people. I'll often tell people, have you ever walked into a room where it was a big argument? So you can feel that in the air. But that's subtle energy that is affecting you. You can learn how to pay attention to what's happening in your own system just like that.
and it's just practice of paying attention to noticing things.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about that period of time where, I mean, to get a diagnosis like this, to to have the medical doctors and professionals tell you this is the only option is to cut off your leg. What did you have to do in order to say, I'm not going to go down that road? Like, what was that like to start? Because you started this by talking about pulling away from the mainstream medical solutions. And so what did you have to do? What went through your mind, and how did your family react, and how did you manage all of that? Because I think any kind of medical crisis, it can be very hard to do that. And
Extremely difficult.
yes,
This was the early 80s. So it
yeah,
wasn't as mainstream as it is today. And even today, it takes a lot of strength to be able to walk away from the traditional way of dealing with things and to find your own way. And it's not for everyone.
no,
I'm not trying to convince anyone to, stop their treatments. It's not for everyone, but it was for me. All signs were pointing that way. It was like the universe had lined up all these ducks in a row, and couldn't, I just couldn't ignore them.
what kind of signs?
Well, for instance, having the dream,
Mhm.
having the doorway to healing myself through herbs open through my brother, which,
Mhm.
if that wouldn't have been there, I wouldn't even have known about herbs, really. It wasn't even on my radar. And then I started having these kind of mystical experiences and these downloads of information. The information I was receiving was not specifically on how to heal myself, but it was more like higher consciousness and spiritually focused. One of the things that I was really blessed about having this particular type of cancer was that if it was growing, it would create a rash on your abdomen. And they had no
Wow.
scientific explanation, but it was a signpost for me. So I would know if what I was doing wasn't working or if it was working.
Wow.
So when I muscle tested and I got all these herbs, like there were herbs for detox on liver and blood and, digestion, everything, just everything under the sun. And as I ran out of them, I couldn't buy them in the city that I lived in. It was an MLM company. I didn't even think about signing up or any crazy thing like that. I contacted the company, asked if there was someone local I could purchase the herbs from. and they sent me to the local college that was like an alternative healing training school.
Oh,
And I went there, and they took me off all of the things I muscle tested, and they didn't muscle test. They did a pH test, and then they'd be like, oh, you need this and you need this, just from their training of what a person would need to improve their immune system. And didn't I get the rash?
so
And I'm like,
this was a holistic college, but
yes,
you were not seeing the same results as when you followed your own muscle testing.
exactly.
That's
So,
interesting. I mean, my takeaway from that is that any modality, we need to evaluate it with all of our tools and information. Just because something's holistic doesn't mean it's good for us. And one modality might work better than another.
exactly, exactly. We really need, customized or tailored to suit methodologies, because there isn't one answer for every person.
Now, okay, so you went down that road with the alternative college. Did you at some point say, this isn't working, I'm going to go back to another way, or
Yeah, absolutely. I'm
yeah,
like, to myself, I'm like, this is not working. So then I actually signed up. Like, I don't sell these herbs from this company, but I signed up just to buy the herbs. And so that was great because I got a discount. I was all happy. Rash went away, never came back. It's just amazing. And then branched out into all kinds of other amazing ways to use that intuitive information that we really all have access to when we set our mind to it.
and you started this also by saying you learned a lot, but you would never wish it on anyone, which just implies it was a difficult thing that you went through. You're able to look back and say, there are things I learned. And do you want to talk a little bit about some of those mystical experiences? Because I'm also hearing it helped you, this process helped you connect with some of that, or all of it. I mean, I don't know how to phrase it,
Yeah,
but
I mean, sure, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that happened to me, it was just a couple, maybe like 2 nights after that diagnosis, and we drove to where our families were, so I could have a little bit of time away from this space and pressure. The doctors were actually putting a lot of pressure on me to get this surgery done right away. And so we left, went out of town, and I stayed the evening or the night at my sister's. And she lived in the country, and there was no traffic noise. There's no street lights. I mean, it was pitch black. The room I was in was so dark that I couldn't believe how dark it was, because I live in a city. It's never that dark. And I actually took my finger and went to my nose, and it's like I couldn't see at all. I just had
couldn't
to
touch
feel
your
it was
nose.
just crazy. And I'm just crying and crying, because I mean, I'm 22. I
Yeah.
I love my husband. I have a beautiful baby, and I have my whole life ahead of me. And this is what's happening. Like, what's this? And I was like so scared.
And this
And
is right after the diagnosis, you're saying, like,
yeah,
and they
yeah,
wanted you to go in for the operation and you took a break
I took a
to
break. I just
process all of it. Okay, because
stepped away.
I think that's important. I think I just
Yeah,
I don't mean to interrupt, but just to highlight, I think that's important. You took a break for yourself to figure this out, to go
yeah,
somewhere neutral.
yeah, and just I don't know why I needed to do that. I just needed to do that,
Hmm.
right? I just needed to do that. And so I'm in this bedroom all by myself, because my husband, he needed a break too. So he went and stayed at his parents that night, and took the baby. I was praying, and I was praying for strength. And I had this mystical experience where this beautiful gold light appeared in the room. And then it came actually inside me, and it took me to this place of absolute unconditional love.
Wow.
No judgment, no criticism. There's nothing wrong, nothing defective, just like the total love that the universe has for you, which is more than you can possibly imagine. It was like waves. I felt like I was, floating in this giant ocean of love. At every movement of the waves was more love and more love and more love. And it just was like so supportive. And it's like probably the most memorable experience I have in my life. And, I have lots of really wonderful experiences too. And, it just created such a spiritual hunger in me to really explore what we can't see with our eyes.
That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. And so that experience, you prayed for something and you had that experience, and that sounds like what you needed to continue in the way that you were continuing on your path of healing.
And it was really challenging because I lived in a city without my family, so I didn't have that network of support, just my husband and some close friends and my baby and my spiritual helpers, which started dropping, messages and images for me, which I greatly appreciate. And in a way, maybe that was a blessing because I didn't have to put have the pressure from the family as well to kind of, are you sure you know what you're doing kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And even the doctor, like the surgeon who meant well, she called me 3 times trying to guilt me into having this surgery because, in her mindset, that was the only way I had any possible chance of surviving.
And so you were getting this well-meaning concern from the doctors, but you were trusting the messages you were getting from your guidance. And did you know when those messages dropped in to your mind or to your heart or however you experience it, did you know that those were messages from spirit? Did you know those were messages you could trust?
Well, I trusted them. So I guess maybe, it's not like I was, I would waver and go into, periods of real fear.
Okay.
But then I would come out. Right? I never, ever considered going back to the protocol that was recommended to me. In fact, I think I walked away from that surgeon. I walked away from my GP at that time. I just walked away from everything and went back and got a new GP, probably, I don't know, a couple of years later anyways, when I knew I would be okay, right? That I was, things were good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just funny. It's funny when you put that much faith in yourself, and I put my life on the line to do it, really, right?
You did. I mean, there's a level of surrender to life as life wanted to unfold for you. And I'm what's running through my mind right now is how often in medical conversations there is this element of fear, and how you were basically redirecting yourself to this surrender of, I'm going to trust the process that I'm being shown.
It probably helped that I was really young and naive. Yeah. But it also goes to show you the miracles the power that we all have inherent
Yes.
within ourselves when we allow that to be.
And that's a great place to wrap up. I think your story, Linda, is so amazing. You're a walking miracle, as many people are. And thank you for being willing to share the details and dive into what that was like, and the process not being cut and dry, but the process being one of, challenging, going back and forth, but ultimately trusting yourself and trusting your spiritual support system.
We come here and we have all these life challenges, but the growth that we have through them is just incredible. So that I would say that to anyone out there going through a challenge, whether it's medical or emotional, relationship, in whatever way their challenge appears to them, to not focus really as much on the challenge and just focus on the growth and the incredible strength that they have to actually have this on their plate and be dealing with it. I mean, everyone is really more strong and more resilient than they know, and more loved. I can't express that enough. How much love the universe has for us is it's beyond human comprehension, really.
And that's a beautiful reminder. Whatever path people choose to go down, and if they do choose the medical advice they're being given, that's okay too, and they're still loved, whichever path people choose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nothing but love. It's been a pleasure talking with you today,
You
Michelle.
too, Linda. And how can people reach you if they want to connect with you?
Oh, for sure. My website is thoughtchange.com, and they can email me, linda@thoughtchange.com, or find me on Facebook as Thought Change, on Instagram as Thought Change 123.
Thank you. And we will say goodbye for now. And remember that you are all loved very much. Bye-bye.